Hi, and welcome to Extra Serving, an award-winning podcast by Nation's Restaurant News. I'm your host, Holly Petre. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking about nostalgia's comeuppance at restaurants, menu price increases, and the results of our Consumer Reports survey. On Takeaway with Sam Oches, Sam talked with Ben Jacobs of Takabe. They spoke about what it's like to have a supply chain of all native people and foods. And be sure to check out First Bite, our daily morning podcast where I discuss the top news of the day alongside an NRN editor. And now it's time to introduce my co-hosts.
I am Sam Oches, Editor-in-Chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
And I am Leigh Zinsmeister, Managing Editor of NRN.
Welcome to the podcast, guys. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday,
Thanks,
indeed.
Happy Friday.
They're going to get a more sassy version of us this week since it's Friday.
Yeah, we're recording on Friday instead of Thursday, so we got our sassy selves out for you guys this week.
We apologize in advance.
Do we? I make no apologies.
You know, it's afternoon. We could have actually had some drinks on this one if we really wanted to.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds. I'll go get a drink.
Seriously. We doing this?
I'm upstairs. I'm upstairs. Too lazy.
Are we doing this?
Can you have one of your tiny humans fetch one for you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I had children. Yeah, but they're
That's
all
what I
gone
thought.
right now. So not in the house at the moment.
Interesting.
So can you have your dog fetch one for you?
No, my dog is way too old, senile, and dumb to do that.
That's a real
Wow.
shame. You should get a dog that can fetch you alcohol.
Yes, that will be the next dog. Yes, the first thing I train that dog to do.
Mandatory.
The first thing. I've seen it on the internet before.
That dogs will do that. Well,
That
sure,
dogs will do that.
Dogs are incredibly smart, but only if you train them to do that. You know, like I was a terrible dog owner when I got our dog because I was lazy, as has been established already, and I didn't train her very well. So now I have a very lazy, not well trained dog. So
Who shakes on podcasts.
she does. She might yet shake on this one because she's at my feet.
No, it's just you and your squeaky chair today.
Just the squeaky chair.
Oh, God.
Anyway,
My British accent is awesome. I just need to tell everybody. I'm not going to do it for the crowd, but I'm going to just tell everybody it's awesome.
you're not allowed
Think if
to
it was-
tell somebody that and then not do it.
I was going to say, I think if it was truly awesome, you would do it for the crowd, but you know the truth about your accent.
Well, when we put out a blooper reel, eventually, you'll hear me saying the intro in a British accent.
You
You're
won't
sure?
really. You'll just hear Holly saying it in what she thinks is a British accent.
Yeah, you won't recognize it as such, but it will be to Holly. I'm sure they will wait with bated breath for that episode.
Who wouldn't? I mean, our bloopers are pretty funny, at least to me.
So long as they're funny to you, that's all that matters.
It'll be the funniest. I'll just be crying the whole episode of tears of joy, not tears of sadness. All right, well, let's talk about restaurants.
Should
Okay.
we? Really? Is that what we do here?
Well, we're talking about nostalgia, so we can talk about all sorts of fun things now.
Oh, God.
I like nostalgia.
We know you do, because you're internally like 150 years old.
Yep. Yes, I am. Thank you very much. I have the grace to prove it.
So all of these brands have been talking about nostalgia lately. McDonald's just released an old bucket for Halloween. Very old, from the 90s.
An old
Ooh.
bucket. Just the way you frame that. We just put out an old bucket.
It might be important context for our listeners to know that Holly doesn't like Halloween. So if you hear any
That's true.
disdain,
I don't
Yeah.
like Halloween. It's true. Burger King's latest ad campaign calls back to nostalgia. Taco Bell just had their marketing campaign where they put two older menu items up against each other. We were talking about it last week on the podcast. Sam was talking about his ad campaign that he remembered. I mean, we were literally bringing up nostalgia as we were the example, the prime example of what that ad campaign was meant to do. So What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about last week, the restaurant companies, along with the rest of the world, are recognizing that particularly kids in the 90s, like, us, are in hardcore nostalgia phase right now. Millennials are jonesing for the 90s, and maybe Gen Z is too. I don't know. Maybe Gen X is and boomers. Who knows? I guess the 90s were okay, but the Taco Bell ad campaign. Well, I guess the Taco Bell one wasn't totally just 90s, because one of the Enchilada was from like the 60s or something. But still, it was hearkening back to the times of yore. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, to use another example, what did I do on Friday night? I watched Hocus Pocus 2, because duh. I mean, Hocus Pocus 1, every year I watch Hocus Pocus because I'm a child of the 90s. It's not a particularly good movie, but does it just scratch that itch, that 90s kids need itch. So that was a weird thing to say. But anyway.
Well, what did you do during the movie? Do you want to tell people?
What did I do?
Do you want to tell people what you did during the movie? Because you told me you fell asleep during the movie.
Oh, I did fall asleep during the movie. Well, but that's
the
the point.
second one, because the second one was bad. Because I also watched it last weekend.
Yeah. Well, but see, that's the thing. That's what I'm getting to here, which is that, like, it's not necessarily even the quality of the thing. It's just the nostalgia of the thing that is counting here. Like, I would have watched that thing no matter how bad it looked, because I watch Hocus Pocus 1 every year, because it takes me back to childhood. So, people will, they will throw money at nostalgic things. They will spend time with nostalgic things, and they don't even have to be good, because they just want that itch scratched, so to speak.
And some of these nostalgia campaigns are going to bring in like the next generation of consumers. Almost millennials, people our age, are going to go to McDonald's to get those boo buckets, are what they're calling them, because of the nostalgia factor. And they're going to bring their kids. Sam's kids are going to end up with boo buckets. And then 30 years from now, they can cycle them back again.
Totally.
It's a never ending cycle. It's like how, fashion and everything cycles every few decades. It's the same kind of thing. And it's bringing in the next generation of consumers. It's bringing our generation back and bringing in our hypothetical children, or Sam's
hypothetical
children.
Yes, thank you. Holly, are you just waiting do you consider yourself a child of the 2000s, Holly? Are you just waiting for us to get into like 2000s fashion and nostalgia?
I'm a child of the 90s. I was born in the 90s.
But you don't remember the 90s, do you?
I remember some of the 90s.
I feel like you qualify more as a child of the 2000s. I was born in the 80s, but I don't claim the 80s because I barely remember them. Anyway, to your point, Leanne, time will march on, and we will start jonesing for the 2000s at some point. And you're right, we're just stuck in this repetitive loop. And the companies are very smart about tapping into that. Now, I'd be curious if nostalgia was much of a thing. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, the 70s were back hardcore, right? And so which makes sense, because that was about 20 years ago. Then we went through our 80s phase. Hello, Stranger Things. We're in our 90s phase now. For some reason, God knows why, they gave us a Full House reboot, but we were in a 90s phase. It will keep going. And restaurants are playing along with that. It makes sense. It's smart marketing because, again, going back to it, you almost don't even have to try. You don't have to make something good. You can hocus pocus to this thing and just throw meat to the wolves, and the wolves will come. You like that? It's pretty good, right?
No.
Meat to the wolves. I don't know. I felt good about it.
Well, so the interesting thing is that McDonald's just brought back these buckets, the boo buckets. See, I was calling them buckets. That's right.
Old
even though
buckets.
It sounds kind of derogatory.
I think I was taking issue with old, not bucket, because it is very clearly a bucket. But to call it an old bucket, I think was maybe not doing it any favors. A Halloween bucket is very appropriate.
They brought back an old bucket, made it sound like they had one bucket. That's what I heard when you said it the first time, and I was like, that's not really what's going on here.
In my head, it was like a beat up wooden bucket with a mop in it. Like when you just say an old bucket.
Yeah.
Same thing. So McDonald's brought back their old bucket versus Burger King took their old idea, their old ad campaign, and they made it new again. They actually added new things to it. They made a new song for it. And so for the Have It Your Way, they made it hip hop rap instead of what it was before. So I find that really interesting that they were changing it to make it more modern versus McDonald's just brought back their old buckets. I'm going to keep saying old buckets now because now I can't stop.
Oh boy.
Because now I just can't think of the other word. And so I find it interesting that the two, I'm curious to see which one works better. I have a feeling McDonald's will actually work better than Burger King's, even though Burger King's is part of the Reclaim the Flame new franchisee reboot that they're doing, that they put all that money into. I have a feeling McDonald's will do much better, and it was a much easier solution for them to do.
Sure. They're
But you're
also,
gonna have
I mean,
purists.
really... Yeah, they're really two different things. Like the Halloween thing, or the McDonald's thing is a Halloween marketing campaign. Like the Boo Buckets are going to go away in November because it doesn't make sense anymore. So yeah, it's a fairly easy, inexpensive, I'm putting that in air quotes, thing that McDonald's can do right now to capture nostalgia and consumers in the month of October. The Burger King thing is part of a wider ongoing marketing, almost complete rebrand that they're working on. So it's a longer range. I think they have different goals. And so in that sense, I think, Holly, you're right that the McDonald's campaign is going to have an immediate impact. I'm sure they're already seeing people show up specifically because they want their buckets. Whereas the Burger King thing, I think has longer range goals that they'll measure by.
Yep.
Even the McDonald's adult Happy Meals are doing the same exact thing. They're aiming to get that nostalgia too, the adult Happy Meals. I mean, I haven't gotten one because there's no McDonald's near me, I don't think. Also, I haven't eaten at McDonald's in a very long time. I'm sure there's a McDonald's near me. I just don't know where it is.
Lower Manhattan.
I was going to say, I'm just surprised you've had McDonald's before. I feel like on this podcast, I keep learning on all the other fast food brands you've never had before. So,
well, I just sampled a very cool food for the first time that you guys will find out about later on in a few weeks, not now.
You're talking about the thing that I was present for too.
Yeah, Sam was present when I sampled this food for the first time.
I was just trying to determine the place you went. I was trying to determine when you said you guys, whether you were talking to me and Leanne or you guys, like everybody who's listening to this right now.
Usually when I say you guys, it's the audience.
Okay, got it. Yes.
I'm not going to remember that.
You did have a restaurant for the first time, and they will all know about it in a few weeks.
Yeah, it was exciting. Right?
It was very exciting.
I've been bragging about it.
Yeah, we're going to have to, that will have to be our good news of the pod in a couple weeks, because we could share that as the good news of now, but it would give it away.
It would give it away. It would give away the surprise.
Sorry, happy news. How could I forget that song, that
There's
catchy
a jingle.
song that
maybe I'll sing it in British today.
In British.
You have to now, so.
I wonder how you sing in British.
I'm sure you'll figure it out.
I'll figure it out.
I think you just sing it just the same as you would in American.
But with a British accent. I got to figure out how to get the British accent in there.
Just channel Adele.
I will channel Adele. Anyways, let's talk about menu price increases.
Let's.
Okay.
So menu prices have increased a lot over the past few months and even year due to inflation. And consumers are starting to react to it. Joanna Fantozzi just wrote a really great piece on NRN about it. So what do you guys think about this? Oh, I do say you guys for the two of you. You're right. You're right. It is confusing. You're right. It is confusing.
Thank you.
We know.
You're right. You're very right. So what do the two of you think about this whole saga of the menu price increases and consumers reacting? I mean, we're going to talk about our consumer reports later, but first let's talk about consumers reacting to menu price increases.
The whole menu price increase thing has been a balancing act for about a year now, right? How do you, as an operator, afford your ingredients and supplies and everything, and also not alienate your consumer base? And so a lot of chains have done multiple small menu price increases. I think Chipotle's raised their prices something like 4 times in the last year, and a lot of chains have done similar strategies, just like increasing them a little bit at a time. What this new data really shows, and Joanna broke down 2 different studies on the topic, and now we're starting to see where that breaking point is for consumers, because consumers understand, like, they're facing inflationary pressures in every area of their lives. And so a reasonable consumer hasn't been upset this year if they go to Chipotle and they have to pay an extra 10 cents for their chicken bowl or whatever. But what we're seeing now, and this is according to Revenue Management Solutions, is that once the menu price has been increased by 10 to 13% is when consumers start dropping off, which as a consumer, I think is reasonable. But of course, as an operator, you're just still playing that balancing act. So that's the kind of data that we're starting to see now, because it's taken us this long to get to the point where some chains have implemented that many menu price increases.
Yeah, and it seems like from these studies, they were singling out the major chains like Burger King, Wendy's, McDonald's, for having significantly increased prices in the 10% range. And it's interesting because when I saw some of the numbers, and look, covering this industry for a long time, I think I knew what these numbers were, but to really see on page what their average prices are now, and it's Burger King's over $8, Wendy's is over $10. I mean, when you throw those numbers around and you think about what is QSR all about, I mean, it's about value. And remember when it was like $5 footlong and the dollar menu, it used to be that you couldn't go over $5 really in the QSR world because your customers would rebel. And we've gotten up now to $8 to $10 for QSR. Now, of course, inflation, even negating the inflation of the last year or so, those prices should have always been going up, because you can't maintain a $4, $5 price point forever with pricing or with inflation constantly happening at some level. But still, it is pretty surprising to see those numbers. And of course, consumers react to that stuff too. Thinking about McDonald's, and when they raised prices on quarter pounder by a quarter, they have customers rebel. I think the last year there have been, to Leanne's point, they've been a lot more understanding that, okay, well, that has to happen. But yeah, at some point you've got to stop doing it, because they keep noticing that those price increases. Wendy's pointed out in Joanna's story, that they were only increasing according to the consumer index but I think that's roughly 6% inflation, roughly, that prices have increased. So QSR prices in particular seem to be increasing even beyond that. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it all, because it's really rocking a hard place. You have to maintain a profit margin, but simultaneously, if you cross that 10 to 13% threshold and start losing customers, well, you've got a bigger problem. And that's where something like a loss leader comes in, where it's like, well, let's take a hit on something because we just got to get customers in the door and look at other ways to get them to spend money to make up for the fact that we're losing money on something because of inflation. So it's an interesting problem. And I think at this point, everybody's probably just holding their breath, hoping that inflation kind of cools off soon. And, we just had a jobs report today that didn't give a lot more clarity to where inflation goes from here, but the Fed continues to try to cool it off. And, yesterday OPEC is cutting the production of oil, which means we're all going to see a gas spike again here probably within the next couple of months. So it's a mess. It's a mess. What do you do? And at the end of the day, again, if you have to make money, you've got to increase prices, but you've just got to figure out a way to do so to where customers are not spooked by it.
Well, that's a great segue into our consumer reports survey, which is all about, talking about what consumers are thinking. Leanne, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. So this is our consumer picks report, just in case people are trying to find it on our website. So every year we work with Data Central and do this big report on basically the brands that consumers are most loyal to is the big thing that we look at. And Ron Ruggles did a great breakdown of the full report for our October issue of our magazine. But what I'm doing over the next few weeks is breaking down all the different things that Data Central asks consumers about. So they rank brands based on a variety of factors. And the one I looked at this week was value, because we've been talking about menu prices and increases and all of that. And so I wanted to see which 10 restaurant brands are the ones that consumers think have the best value for the dollar. So that's what I did. This list, it's on our website. It's not a lot of surprises, mostly QSR chains. The top 3 with the best value, according to consumers, are all pizza brands. But something I think is interesting is that the question that these consumers are asked for this report is, do you think that this brand is best in class for value? So basically, do you think this brand has good value? And we say, for example, number 1 on this list is Little Caesars. 71% of consumers said that Little Caesars are best in class or above average on value. Last year's number 1 brand had a much higher percentage of consumers ranking them that way. So overall, I think consumers are finding less value, which again, not surprising, but interesting to see that, consumer perception, because we only really look at consumer perception this one time a year. So this is a really interesting time to be looking at it. So we've got a lot of quick service brands, but not all quick service. Golden Corral is on the list. They were on the list last year as well. But mostly QSR, pizza, some burger chains. And that's what we've got. And then I'll be once a week breaking down other things that consumers have ranked these brands on.
Yeah, something that was interesting in the consumer picks overall this year, which you can continue to find out as we dole out this information over the next couple of weeks, is that across the board, a lot of the numbers were lower. So we study attributes, Data Central, our value data partner, they do the studying for us. So we report on multiple characteristics: ambiance, cleanliness, craveability, delivery, takeout, quality service, all of those things, which again, we will have that information up at NRN.com. And across the board, numbers were a little bit lower. And so, and then the big chart that we report on is loyalty. And that is really truly saying, who is your favorite brand that you pick, not because of the convenience of it, but because you're loyal to them. So that's the big one that we report every year. We have the top 50 that we published in NRN this month. You'll see it on the website. And those numbers were lower than normal. So all across the board, Data Central suggested to us that could be a sign that overall impressions of restaurant companies are going down. This is not a good thing, that the impression of restaurants, the relationship between the brand and the customer is perhaps souring a little bit. And I just got to tell you, and this is not to point fingers, because everybody listening to this could going to sting a little bit, but I don't have a lot of good restaurant experiences anymore. I mean, on the whole, restaurants in general are really struggling on the just broader experience front because of the labor issue, right? And I know enough to say, okay, well, give them a pass because we've got a real labor issue here. But, a lot of people won't give restaurants a pass, unfortunately. And so if they have that bad experience, for me, it's mostly customer service. I've had a lot of bad customer service experiences in the last several months. And I'm guessing a lot of folks listening probably the same thing, because broadly speaking, when, you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to labor, that's just a natural reaction. But when you look at our data in the consumer picks, I wonder if that's playing out some in the data here too. And then the last thing I'll say just about the value data in particular, since that's what we're talking about, it did surprise me who wasn't on this list. I don't see Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is across all of the other charts, all the other attributes. Chick-fil-A shows up basically at or near the top, not on the chart for value. A lot of the other standard QSRs are not on here. McDonald's is not on here. Wendy's and Burger King are not on here. Taco Bell is, but then again, lots of pizza brands are. So it's just an interesting thing to look at this data and say, well, what is value then to people? Because if pizza is a big player here, and you think of Little Caesars, they're $5 hot and ready. Well, you get a nice big pizza for a nice low price point. So, maybe that truly is what value is. In Golden Corral, it's a buffet. So people pay a price point and they get, all they can eat. So I don't know that there's necessarily, what do you take out of this? What's the actionable information? I think the actionable information here is just to know that the customer's perception of value is changing. They continue to want value. They're clearly finding it in pizza places. And when you see the rest of the data too, you'll know that the broader experience may be suffering, and you have to figure out like which lever to pull, to which attribute you need to sort of improve upon to try to get that customer loyalty back.
Very interesting. Excuse me. Very interesting things to think about when it comes to value and loyalty. And it's an interesting report that we put out every year with Data Essential. And it's definitely something that I suggest going through and looking at Leanne's weekly reports that she puts out. It's definitely going to be interesting to see more of the deep dives as we go into it. But definitely read Ron's piece. I'll put it in the show notes so you guys can read up on that. Now it's time for happy news. Oh, wait, British accent. Happy news. Happy news.
You just got rid of your H?
For happy news.
I know enough Brits to know that they do pronounce their H usually, but sure. I think the dropping of the H is Cockney specifically, but okay, you do you.
Maybe we're talking about appy news as in news about apps.
We're not. We're talking about in-person news. We are talking about a really exciting event that we are having in DC on October 17th for restaurant folks just like you guys listening to this podcast. Sam, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about this event and a little bit more about the interview that we have coming up to promote it?
I certainly will, Holly. Thank you for that kind introduction. So we are very excited to be in Washington, D.C., October 17th, 6 to 9 p.m. at Chaya Taco's Chinatown location on I Street. It's going to be a networking reception. It's a free networking reception, free drinks, free food, free conversation. We will also have an educational panel that we're super excited about. This is what we're calling the Create Roadshow. And, just a little bit more about that is that we just had Create a couple of weeks ago in Denver. We had a blast. But not everybody can get to Denver, whether they're, preoccupied or they just, cost or whatever it is. And so we want to take Create to the people. We want to, give everybody an opportunity to be able to connect with their peers in the restaurant industry like we were able to do in Denver a couple of weeks ago. And so this is the first of what hopefully will be many of the Create Roadshow series, starting with DC on October 17th. Who can come? If you're an employee of a restaurant company, you are free to join us. We say we're looking really for emerging restaurateurs and independent restaurant operators just because, that's who is just a lot of them in and around downtown DC. But if you're a franchise, if you're a major chain executive, obviously everybody who works for a restaurant company is welcome because, the best thing about this industry, I've said it before on this podcast, is the community of it. And if you haven't experienced that community, you need to get out of your bubble. You cannot operate just, alone in a bubble, yourself and your company. You need to meet other people doing what you do. And this is an opportunity to do that. So if you are in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area there around the nation's capital, and you have October 17th, that evening free, I highly encourage you to join us. Because it will be an awesome opportunity to connect with other people in this industry. I mentioned that we are going to be hosting a panel, and two of the panelists are the guests on this week's podcast, Sahil Rahman and Rahul Vinod, who are the co-founders of Rasa, an Indian fast casual in DC with 4 locations. They're awesome. They have such a fantastic brand with a ton of potential. They will be sitting on that panel along with Bettina Stern and Suzanne Simon, who are the co-founders of Chaya Tacos. I will be moderating this discussion. We're going to be talking about what it means to scale your business as an emerging concept in particular. There'll be great tips and insights that they're going to be sharing. So all around, highly valuable night. Again, totally free. Just come hang out, meet folks in the industry, learn a little bit, have free drinks, all around a really, really good event. So you will find that invitation also in the show notes. Click on that RSVP. Please come join us. Our whole team, almost our whole team will be there too. Most of our editors, the 3 of us here will be there, along with some of our other colleagues. So it's going to be some exciting stuff.
Well, thank you so much for that, Sam. That was so informative and so lovely. Thank you for that.
You're quite welcome.
Well, so now I will toss it over to your interview. Thank you guys so much for joining me today.